Hello, and welcome to Liner Notes Live. Today's guest will be Joe Yeatman, who also happens to be my long lost cousin that I found through flutes. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Helen, nice to be here with you.
It's always fun to be with you. Now, we're here to discuss your new CD, which, well, we think of it as an album. We love albums, and that's why we're all here. So, would you like to give everybody a little start off with your album?
Sure. So the name of the album in question is Standing Free,
Mhm.
and it's actually a collection of music that I have previously released, most of it on singles and some of it on previous albums. But the two interesting things about the collection, first of which is these are songs which tend to be some of the more popular ones that I've got, and they make a great album grouped together, right? So most of them were singles originally, but they just work so well together. And they tend to be a little different than most of what I have done on albums. And so putting them together into this format, into a new album, seemed like a really great way to release this music more broadly to the public. And also, it's what would really like to represent my sound with, at local gigs. If someone asks if I've got a CD, this is the CD that I'd like them to listen to. I mean, I'd love for them to listen to everything, but this, maybe there's a chance that people will listen to this one. And then let me mention as well that the album is out today on digital platforms. It's on my website as a downloadable album. It's available as a playlist on Spotify and YouTube. My goal or my desire is to have it produced on physical CDs. And so what I'm doing is I'm running a bit of a campaign between now and April 15th. If I can sell just 25 album downloads, digital downloads of this music, then I can afford to get a small run of CDs produced. And I will send physical CDs when I get them to the people who had ordered the digital download. So you might think of it as a pre-order, except it's conditional on reaching the threshold. But we're working on it already, and so I think maybe 20 more are needed to get to that point. So quite easily achieved, I hope.
Yeah, and especially since you just put it out today, that's great. And I know I've got one, and I hope it does come to fruition because I want to carry them in my store because CDs sell when we go to shows. There are a lot of us who just don't want to give up the tactile, physical experience of our music.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. I have been forced into the future. My own laptop can't play a CD. My vehicle can't play a CD. So as much as I love them, I can't even play my own music on CDs. I remember as a kid laying on the floor at my next door neighbor Mickey's house and just reading typically Elton John album covers, word for word, the lyrics, the copyright notice, commentary from everybody involved. So I really enjoy, as you said, the tactile feedback from the physical CD. I like owning it. To be honest, I like owning a copy,
Yes.
and I'm not at the whim of some technical and digital gods to provide it when I want to hear
That's
it.
true. And I loved the artwork and all of those things. And I remember when I used to tear open the albums that, I didn't know whether to put the album on first or dive into the notes first for the whole experience. And I have kept my albums and I love them. And I do have the capability of playing CDs and I will continue to do so, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Off topic for as far as the nature of today's show, but I have one vinyl album left. I have my first record ever. I still have. It is Meet the Beatles, and I was so young when I received it that I spelled my name wrong when I wrote it on the jacket.
Oh, okay. I don't know what to say to that, Joe. That's charming. That's just wonderful. So why don't we move forward into your songs and what you've included in this? Because I know, and I'm very excited to let everybody else know.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about them a bit. In general, the songs here represent either my most popular songs. One of them has almost 450 streams on Spotify, or my most heartfelt songs, the ones that I put the most feeling into. And by that I mean, moved me as I was playing them, or sometimes when I talk about them. The most immersive music that I've done, which can be a combination of playing and mixing and producing style. But it tends not to be a solo native flute album, which I love, but this is a little bit higher production value, a little bit higher production quality. The first song on the album is one that's sometimes difficult to talk about, because it's emotional for me, and I tend to get long-winded. But it's called White Owl, and I'll try to give you the flavor of it without giving you the 30-minute version. But I received a flute from that had been made a decade earlier by a fellow named Ken Green, called himself and his flute making company White Owl Products. And when I got the flute, it was missing a block. So I looked up his phone number, and I called and talked to Ken and his wife and asked if they could provide a new block for my flute. And they said they certainly could. And within a matter of days, I received a new carved turtle block to fit on top of this old flute, which is interesting because a turtle is a Native American symbol for longevity, among other things. So I put the block on the flute, I played it a little bit, and I emailed them immediately, within an hour probably of receiving the new block. And I asked, as part of my email, you know, can you give me some price guidance on Ken's flutes in case I want another one in the future? And his wife emailed me right back and said, paraphrasing a bit, there will be no more flutes. Ken was killed Friday in an interstate traffic accident. He was I think, a big rig driver and was killed. And there's a big investigation. So anyway, so the Ken Green, flute maker, now deceased, and by completing this decade-old flute that I had by sending me the block, I believe that flute was probably the last NAF that Ken Green finished, by completing it for me by sending the block. And so I was moved by the story, and I recorded this song called White Owl as a tribute song, as a tribute to Ken. It's a little on the long side, but it's a very, now that you know the story, it's sort of a heart-wrenching, sad, very emotive flute song. And in it, among other things, are some sound effects of owls. And at the very end of the song, you can hear big wings flapping as the white owl, you know, leaves the scene. Coincidentally, I sent it to his widow after the fact, and I didn't follow up on this, but she told me she was going to use it at his memorial service, play it at his funeral.
Wow. That's an amazing story and a treasured flute, I am sure.
Yeah, I don't play it often. It tends to be, so zoned in on that story and that song that I don't use it for general purposes. I should. It's a great flute, but it's sort of like it was typecast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A friend of mine, a good friend of mine here in Tucson, listened to that song, and he told me, he says, that song, and what's conveyed in that song, and the musicality in that song, he said, is why he got into the Native American flute. Not as a direct reflection of my recording, but when he got into the flute, it was so that hopefully he could do that kind of giving, in his own music. So it's
You know,
high watermark for me, I would say.
I I must say that's the thing I love about the flute is it is such a personal it just keeps giving and giving, and a story like that and this flute forever will be with that, and this person found the music to move him, and that's just a beautiful story, though wish he was still here. But it's
Absolutely.
the
He
connection.
made good flutes. I've had a couple of others, but that's one that's in a cherished spot. Now, not to be too buzzkillish, but I want to talk for a minute or two about one other song that's got a bit of a sad background, and then maybe we can get on to happier tracks. But there's a song on here called "The Crossing," instrumental, and I know you're familiar with it.
Mhm.
And The Crossing is a track that I released as a, I guess you'd call it an EP. There was an instrumental version and the primary version, which is a poem. It's a spoken word message with flute playing accompanying it. And of course, I'm playing the flute, and I also wrote the poem. But it's a story, or it's story's not the right word, but it's a message about crossing over, about the end of life experience. And for those of us that haven't done it yet, right, but we know people that have or who are in the process, we have to let them go. It is a somewhat solitary journey because we can only accompany them to the bridge. We can't cross with them, right? But it's the message about the peace and the hope and the comfort that should also come in that time. And uh, it's another, I would say, it's my other song that I'm most proud of.
Mhm.
It's not musically challenging particularly, but I just love the message and I love the way it got put together. But I recognize not everybody needs that message today. Everybody will need it, but not everybody needs it today. So I released an instrumental version of it, which is all of the same music, but I kept the spoken poem out, so it'd be not quite so depressing, I suppose, for the listener.
Well, that is my favorite of yours, as you know. And it came into my life at a time when I needed it. And I have since, when it's the right time for other people that I know and care about to share it with them, I think I've shared that quite often. It's a beautiful story. We do all need that story and recognize that story, but the instrumental is beautiful. And it's funny because I'll hear your music and I'll hear the instrumental. I know the words basically by heart by now,
Right.
and it still gives me that hug. It's that kind of song.
Yeah, and there's a couple of effects in it where you hear a little twinkling, which during the spoken message, the twinkling sound happens when I'm talking about someone, being the light in your life, kind of a concept. And then when the spoken word is out and you still hear the twinkle, you know exactly what it's referring to. So it's
Yeah,
it's kind of neat.
it is really neat.
Recently I had a friend over, and I helped her record her first song. And I think it will become her first album when she's finished with it. But we were sitting here right where I am, and I played her that song before we got heavily into the recording session, and she just had to put her head down on the desk and sob during it. I felt I was I was at the same time proud to have created such a moving moment for her, and at the same time I felt bad for putting her into tears here in my office. But anyway,
There's
it's a powerful song, and I hope
very
people will
powerful.
listen to
And see, everybody, it depends on where you are at the time when you hear it. For me, at this point, because I have heard it often, it's a hug, and it's a hug from above. It's a hug from.
it. Yeah, and that's the intent. It's hopefully it provides a sliver of peace, a moment of comfort, a hug, as you say. It's not all bad,
No,
right?
it's
It's
another way
uncomfortable,
to
but it's
look at
not
it,
all
and
bad.
yeah, another way to look at it and paint it.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
yeah, I love that song.
Now, there's another one that I know you have a connection to. Uh, it's called Astral Mist. It's second or third track probably on here, and this is an interesting one in that I had a collection of songs I was planning to release as an album, and I let Peter Fippen listen to the collection beforehand, and he said that's your next single, referring to Astral Mist because he liked the way it sounded. As he would say, it has the big smooth. It's low and slow and ample reverb without being too kitschy. So I did. I carved it out of that collection and I released it as a single, and it has 430 or something like that, 430,000 listens on Spotify. So it's my most popular individual tune, not the most popular release. Believe it or not, I've got another album that I think in total is ahead of that. But that's the most popular individual song,
Wow,
and I recorded it on that very flute.
that
So
you made.
I made that flute. It's from a yucca plant stalk, which we have in abundance here in southern Arizona. And it's in the key of C sharp. And I don't, did you name it or did we name it
No,
collaboratively? But
you named it and I had to have it.
it came to be called Black Beauty anyway, uh, for obvious reasons. And then those of you who know Helen know she's a fairly persistent individual. And she let me know in no uncertain terms she wanted that flute, and I was not willing to sell it. Uh, and then she let me know again and again and again and again and again. Sooner or later, I acquiesced
Yes,
and
well,
let her
you
have
do
that
like to
particular
spoil
flute.
your cousin.
Yeah,
And
that's
you do have lifetime borrowing rights anyway.
oh good, thanks. I may need to record something with it again. That's the only C sharp I've ever made, by the way.
I'm proud to have it. I love it. And I'm very proud of your album doing that single, I'm sorry, doing that, reaching those numbers. I can't even fathom that. It must feel marvelous.
Well, it is. It's validation of sorts. It doesn't change my retirement schedule any. Um, the payout from digital streaming is so small, but it does make me feel good. I smile and pat myself on the back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the release that I referred to that has also done real well is called Body and Soul, and on it there's a person sort of in profile, in a meditative yoga seated position, and all of the music on that particular album is slow and meditative, relaxing, and it all happens to be accompanied by a tempura, an Indian tempura, as sort of as a droning sort of thing. And each of the tracks on that album is done in a different key, each key being associated with a different chakra. And so on this album, Standing Free, I took the most listened to one of them called I Am, and I included it on here as a sample of that. And that happens to be in the key of C for, I believe, the third eye chakra.
Mm-hmm. And do you do yoga and meditate?
No, I don't. I certainly know some folks that do, including yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from several through Facebook, et cetera, that they use that album and some of my other song, in their own studios. But no, I am not. I'm too old and pudgy.
Mm-hmm. Well, on to the next song.
Have you got a favorite
Of yours,
in the mix? Yeah,
The Crossing
yeah.
will forever touch me. It's part of my life going forward because I'm at that age, and like you said, things happen. And I also have a lot of friends who are my age and older, and things happen. And I'm very connected to that song and always will be. It was a gift.
Well, here's one with some background slash trivia that I bet you don't know about. One of the tracks on this album is called Habu Sake. Any idea what that could possibly refer to?
Well, I believe it refers to an experience in your lifetime when you were younger. And
Sort of, yeah. So when I was younger, my dad was in the Air Force for 20 years, and we spent some 3 years during the 70s on Okinawa. And sake, of course, is the Japanese rice wine. And we had a particular kind of snake on Okinawa called a habu. It's a pit viper,
oh,
a significantly poisonous snake, habu. And anyway, the Okinawans make a type of hooch that they call habu sake, which is sake with an actual snake coiled up in the bottle, similar to the scorpion that you might find in mezcal or some tequilas, but it's a literal snake. And from what I understand, it's not a very pleasant thing to drink, but it's supposed to have, sort of a culturally significant medicinal value for, you probably look it up. It's one of those things that you'd find more interesting to read about than to hear about, perhaps. But anyway, this song is called Habu Sake because I did it on a rim blown flute, and it doesn't have the typical Native American Southwestern sort of sound, I thought it had a very Japanese
Mhm.
motif or a very Japanese aesthetic to the sound. And I included also some tinkling bamboo wind chimes as accompaniment. It's an interesting tune, very quite different than all the others. I think it's the longest one I've done. It's 8 minutes and 40 seconds, um, which is sort of an experiment for me in song length. But it's it's very soothing, deeply relaxing, and almost always I if I turn it on, get in my red recliner, put in my earbuds, and turn on that particular song, I seldom make it to the end. I'm out.
Well, I like snakes. I had horse farms, and well, I still have one, but the horses aren't there any longer. But so I've spent a lot of time, out in nature, and I find snakes really nice. But I don't think I'd want to find them in my bottle of anything.
Yeah, I'm
I
with
would
you on
imagine
that.
that's got to be very pungent.
Yeah, and it depends on whether how pungent it is depends on how they process the snake beforehand. Sometimes they don't process at all; they just chunk it in. More that's I guess the more locally produced stuff, and then sometimes they'll have a little bit more of a mummification process. Google habu sake,
Okay,
and
I
it's
will do
interesting
that, and I'll
stuff,
tell you. You wouldn't get these liner notes anywhere else.
right?
That's an interesting
Exactly.
fact.
And if you go back to its original release, there's a field, a flooded field, and a red torii gate, a very Japanese, very Okinawan imagery. And there's some Japanese writing on the cover of that release, which says Habushu, which is Japanese for Habusaki.
Well, that's cool. I did not know that part either. That's a very interesting story.
Yeah.
What else has come out of the mind of Joe Yeatman?
Well, it's all different. An interesting one, I suppose, Wolf Moon
Yeah.
is is on this. Wolf Moon was the title track of a different album not long ago, but it's one of the more popular songs from that track, and it's one of what I think is one of the more immersive songs that I've done. More enveloping sound experience, not just the flute, but the entire auditory experience. So it's on here. Uh, Interesting thing about Wolf Moon is the combination of actual recorded wolf calls and wolf calls played by me on the flute. I recorded the song on a Hawk Littlejohn F sharp, and with a little bit of creative fingering, you can make some really excellent wolf calls, wolf howls, and so they're in the song, sort of to bridge between the actual wolf sounds and the music, and also in as an ornament.
Hmm.
Interesting to listen to, but also, I we haven't talked about this before, but one of the things that I love about Native American flute music in general is the ability to color outside the box a little bit,
Yes.
right? You don't have to just play the handful of notes that are supposed to be in the flute. You can make some other sounds and you can combine them in interesting ways. And I enjoy practicing on nature sounds, wind, horse whinnying, for instance. You have a story about that.
Mhm.
Um, Birds chirping, wolves and coyotes, etc. I encourage everybody to pick up a flute. Maybe a G flute is good for a lot of these kinds of noises, and just mess around with it. In addition to playing the notes, see what other noises you can make, and you may very well be able to squeeze them into a song, which is accidentally a good segue into yet another of the tunes. By the way, talk about making noises. Well, one of the other tracks on this album is called Tread Lightly. And in it, it has a very jungle esque backing track. You hear dripping water, dripping off of the leaves in the rainforest, and you hear a big cat, probably a jaguar, creeping through the jungle, and a frog, and things of this sort. And uh, the most of the sound effects in this track are me, in addition to the flute. But the frog is this literal wooden frog, stroked one way to make a frog of a certain size, and stroked another way to make a frog of a different size. My wife's father's bird call is in it, as well as a couple of sounds that I did from here up. So in this track, if you listen to it, tread lightly, you will hear a jaguar, which is just me doing my little guttural growl thing.
Oh,
And the name, by the way, tread lightly, it's not spelled out anywhere, but in my head, it is tread lightly, or that jaguar may eat you. You know, it's tread lightly, or whatever's out there may get you. And there's another sound in it. I mentioned water dripping off of the foliage, you know, and landing on the floor of the jungle. So that's how I'm doing the water drip sound. I know Mary Youngblood had an album that she actually recorded in a cavern, and you can hear water dropping from the ceiling
mhm.
and landing in pools at the bottom, which was naturally there. And I liked the idea, but in my case, finger and chin.
Well, I know I knew the story and the sound effects, and I've heard you do your sound effects before, and you've got more than that. And that's my favorite backstory to your albums is knowing that that's actually you, because when you listen to it and it's all put together and polished, the thought of seeing you making all these noises
Yeah,
doesn't come to mind. But when I think about it, I just find it very humorous. And I've got a class that's very frisky, and we love exploring, like what you said. And we're actually doing our version. It's a narrated thing, sort of like Peter and the Wolf, where we actually narrate a story, and the horse comes by, and a hawk comes down, and then the eagle. And we're very good at making mosquito sounds on the flute, and
oh yeah,
it's this whole thing. And it, by the time we're done going through it, and it changes every time, we are just laughing and enjoying each other's company and the music and sounds that we make. And it's just, that's the thing about this flute. Another thing, not only does it touch different people in different ways, it brings joy.
yeah,
You get people together to play flute, and you're having a good time.
yeah. It's a toy box.
It is a
It's a musical toy box. So is your mosquito? Is it a singular buzz, or is it like a swarm?
no. He starts off in the distance, and he gets rather loud, and it's a swarm.
That's
And
neat.
basically, at the end of the story, the person it gets back on his horse, of course, because I'm into the horses, and goes galloping home. And you hear the mosquitoes chasing him through the bush while the owl and the coyote are howling.
Yeah, neat. I'll have to try it. You know, the eagles, hawks, loons, doves,
Mhm.
even the quails that are always in our backyard. All of these things are excellent noises to try to fabricate. I almost said imitate, but you know, you're not quite doing it imitatively, but interesting sounds birds are to try to do on the flute.
And I
Wind,
actually met you through a sound effect. I saw
ish.
this person on a video, didn't know who he was, playing a horsehead flute, which was just gorgeous, and he was making it sound like a horse whinnying.
Yeah.
Then I recognized your name, and all Yeatmans, Yetmans, and Yeomans are related, so I got in touch, and I did get the flute. We had a great time. You had the flute up for sale, and I must say, you've given me lessons, and I practice whinnying like a horse, but my sound more comes out like a donkey.
Well, nothing wrong with that. I've always wanted a miniature donkey.
Me too.
I'll just turn on your YouTube channel when I need some. One other quick thing, uh, everybody should try this with a flute whose nest area is nice and flat. You can make sound like wind by simply moving the block too far back.
Mhm,
If you move it back much farther than it's supposed to be,
mhm.
but blow through it, you will get a very windy sound. But depending on precisely where you put it, you'll still get some tonality that you can control. And it's a great way to introduce a wind sound effect. On my very first ever album, or sorry,
Okay.
second, I did a track that was called Winter Wind, and it's introduced with several seconds of fabricated wind by having simply moved the block literally so far back that it wouldn't play. But it was still made a really gusty, windy sound with a hint of tune in it.
That's neat. Ours, when we do it a little differently. We're gonna incorporate that, but we cuff our hands on the ends, and we move our hands and we blow through the hole. This isn't set up for us to be playing music and sounds, but you blow through the holes, and you can get the same thing by going like this with your hands. But we don't get
Oh,
the tune. But then
through
we're
the
ready
finger
to
holes.
play right away. Well, we're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna try yours, and you try mine, and I guess it must run in the family trying to do all kinds of sound effects.
Yeah. So totally unrelated, but here's another thing that runs in the family. This is a test, Helen. And
Okay.
this is a thing that I can do, and my brother can do, and my mother could do. And I have not met another human on the planet who can do it other than us three. So it's something that's carried forward in my maternal set of genetics.
Okay.
Ready?
Now prepared. Well, aren't you special? Can you do that and do the raindrop at the same time?
Oh, wait a minute. That was the easy version.
Oh, okay. You got me.
Yeah. So doing that finger pop with the tongue on the upper lip instead of in the side, as far as I know, it's a Yeatman thing, but only those related to my mom's side of the family.
Well, I'm gonna work on that, Joe, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Well,
But I
hopefully
don't.
someone else in the audience will see that and they'll say, "Hey, I can do that." And then through a little genealogy research, I'll find another cousin.
Well, how about that? The family grows.
Well, there's other songs on here, but I don't want to just bore everybody with the details of what I put together and why. I think I'll open up for some questions, but what I would like to do probably then is just thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this music and to encourage people to listen to it and hopefully to download the digital version of the album so we can get it out there on actual physical shelves.
And try those sound effects by Joe Yeatman.
Try it. Yeah.
Maybe we should try a flute circle that's all we do is sounds to go with our flutes. Well, Joe, I've enjoyed this time. I always enjoy my time with you. The things that you know, that you share, that you've taught me, your generosity, and this CD is absolutely wonderful. And I'm so thrilled that the crossing is on it as well as Astral to go with my flutes. Every single one of them is beautiful. So
I
I really
appreciate it.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, thank you all for joining in for our first Liner Notes Live, which, by the way, came about through conversations with my cousin Joe. So, until next time, yeah. So, until next time, happy fluting, everybody. Bye bye.
Everyone.